Hi, this is Laura, and I am going to cover weeks 9 and 10 of our course in this video. And these are the last 2 weeks that we have together, so I look forward to seeing all of your work that is culminating in this course. So just a couple things to make sure you review. I'm going to go into the kind of the overview for these last 2 weeks. So you'll be covering organizational planning and controlling as a topic, and then you will have different activities that are due. The things that you want to pay most attention to are the dates here, because there are a few different dates. You have a quiz that's due. That's over the topic of the organizational planning and controlling. You have your last critical thinking assignment, which is your leadership/management philosophy that you've been working on, and your final course reflection. Those are both due August 30th, and that basically is the end of the class. So a couple things as you go through these last 2 weeks. Make sure you take a look at our PowerPoint, and I'll go through some of the highlights on that real quickly here. Okay, here's our chapter. I'm going to scroll down to some of the biggest pieces. We've heard about throughout the term this idea of planning and how important that is to management. So there's a good video here to take a look at. But thinking through the different roles of kind of the manager, the planning, the oversight, making sure the monitoring, the controlling, those things, that the leading, remember those are from the beginning of our term. But the planning process, here are the steps: developing an awareness of the present state, establishing outcome statements, so goals, and then step 3, premising, which is including forecasting and formulating assumptions. Step 4, determining a course of action, which includes identifying alternatives, evaluating those alternatives, and then selecting from those alternatives. And step 5 is formulating supportive plans and making changes in existing plans and creating new and supportive plans. So essentially, when you're thinking about planning, you want to make sure you're aware of what the situation is, you determine your goals, you kind of make some assumptions and forecast what you think will happen, and then you take some time to determine courses of action, and you do that by looking at alternatives, and then you let yourself be flexible, and you develop your plan, but you also build in some flexibility to change. And then here's just an example of how an organization might do some planning. So you have a high-level goal at the university level, and then each school or each department, let's say, in an organization, and then all the way down to like a committee or an individual or a department. So this is what it could look like. Everybody should ideally be marching in the same direction towards goals. Now, there's an individual, last name Deming, who came up, and this is actually I believe, one of the more simple forms of planning to remember, and actually very effective. It's the plan, do, check, act. And what that does is you, at any point in a cycle, but it's like that prior process we looked at. So you plan, you do it, you check on it, and you act, which act can include making modifications. So you kind of have 2 parts where you're doing things. The planning, this is kind of starting to execute on the plan. This is checking how things are going. This is really executing the plan. But this, if you can remember that plan, do, check, act, that is one of the simplest forms of planning. Additionally, you want to do the controlling part, as we mentioned earlier in the term. So controlling, also another good word for it is monitoring. So when you have a plan, you want to closely monitor it and make sure it's achieving its milestones and goals, and then adapt. So here's some examples in here. I won't go through this exactly, but it does talk about a plan, different kinds of time frame plans, organizational plans, and contingency plans. And here's an example if you want to look at it. And there's a lot of concept checks throughout this one. So the other thing, the effects of goals on performance. What that means is when you have performance that you're measuring, that if you have no goals, it's really hard to assess performance. So you'll see that if you have no goal, the performance level is fairly low. If you have a general goal, the performance level is mediocre. If you have a really easy goal, the performance level can also be low. But when you have difficult and specific goals, the performance can be high. And what I can tell you, and you may look at your own example in your lives, is the more challenging a goal or more specific a goal is, the more likely you are to achieve it because you achieve those higher levels of performance. Here's a model of goal setting. You commit to the goal, you work on the goal, and then there's kind of goal acceptance and goal commitment. So you identify a goal essentially, but then the goal difficulty and specificity also play into the effort towards the goal itself. And an individual, in order to be motivated towards a goal, has to feel like they have control over elements of that goal, and that pertains to commitment and acceptance. And then in terms of goal commitment, there are external and interactive factors that determine a person's commitment to a goal. There's also internal factors, and then ultimately that leads to goal commitment. And again, the more likely you are to have control over things that impact that goal, the better off you are. Performance, aspiration level, and satisfaction. Your performance, if you think about it in anything, it could be even something you're learning, how to play an instrument, how to play a sport, any of those kinds of things. When you kind of look at it, or if it's a job and you're trying to do better, your performance level is impacted by your extrinsic outcomes desired. Those are things outside of yourself, your aspiration level, and your intrinsic, which is coming from inside of you, outcomes desired. And if you don't have those, you're relatively dissatisfied. If you do have those, you are satisfied. So oftentimes when you start feeling maybe burnout or that you're not as motivated towards an activity, sometimes you can reassess your intrinsic and extrinsic feelings and see if that you can adjust any of those. Again, this is already what I talked about. The ability to have control over something allows you to more completely own a goal and achieve it. So here again, the control model or monitoring model, you establish standards whereby you will monitor and then monitor the behavior and results. You compare actual behavior against standards and evaluate and improve. Okay. Here are some reasons you want to monitor. Positive effects, you have negative effects, but more common are the positive effects, that when you are monitoring things, performance is better, it reduces ambiguity, it clarifies expectations. It does sometimes feel a little more bureaucratic when there's a monitoring model in place. So you have to have flexibility in all of that. Okay. The gap between planning and doing. This is challenging. So the general thing that I'd like you to take away is that the better the plan, the more likely you are to hit the goal. And so you have to align the plan with the people and the processes of getting things done. So you need to then also monitor and improve as you go. Okay, I'm not going to really cover that. Management by objective is just maybe a little bit smaller term planning process where you hit smaller goals in order to hit a larger goal. And so this is the process for doing that. If that is of interest, this doesn't work in all cases. Like a place where, like manufacturing companies, this might be a good way to do this, or a place where maybe you struggle to achieve your goals, better to make small term plans. Okay. I think that's about it for this, and I appreciate all of your efforts, and let me close this out and we'll go back to the assignments. So once you've done this, you'll want to go through the quiz. You'll want to make sure you take that as you have been all term. Then you get into week 10. This is, again, we're having weeks 9 and 10 released at this time, so you have plenty of time to get activities completed. You will go ahead and take a look at the Management of Technology and Innovation. That's Chapter 18. That's our last chapter. There's no quiz, but you do have reminders to complete your final management and leadership philosophy and your course reflection, and those are provided here to you. The one thing I want to make sure I point out in the critical thinking assignment in terms of what you need to do, you need to essentially make it look aesthetically pleasing, which means it should look professional. Add either some pictures or some colors. Don't make it look so, like something that you haven't really thought about and worked hard on. It should look professional. I'm aware that you did the one just a few weeks ago and had peer feedback. If you do use this template, that's fine, but again, add some color and maybe your own creativity to it, and think about it as something you might post in your office or in your workplace so that people can see the type of leader or manager that you aspire to be. And then lastly, you have a course reflection to tell me about some takeaways for the course, and you can share with your peers. And then we have wrapped up, and I look forward to seeing all of your good work. Thank you.